All right, welcome once again to My Friends Like Cool Shit. And we have our first ever second time guest, my dear friend, former roommate, Amy. Last time we talked about our love of physical media, and we now have an interesting topic in the Marvel movies, which is something I never talk about on the internet. So this will be fun. But you ended up finding an interesting order to watch all the Marvel projects in, and you've recently completed that. So tell us a little bit about the order and where you found it.
So I oh dear, about 4.5 years ago at this point, I patched together a list of the entire Marvel universe in chronological order. I used a couple different sites, and we're not talking just the movies. I did all the TV shows, all the Netflix shows, all the really bad Hulu shows, everything. I caught up on all the Disney Plus stuff. So I spent a very long time compiling that list, and then an even longer time actually watching through everything, because just watching through the movies is a lot, but then to watch through TV shows where some of them have 22 episodes in a season was quite the time commitment.
Now, remind me, did anyone ever advise you against skipping some or most of those television shows?
Oh, you mean such as yourself? Yeah, everyone kept saying, "Oh, well, you don't have to watch this, or don't bother with the Netflix shows. They're not really canon, or Shield drops off. Like, don't bother." But I feel like at every point in the road, reflecting on it, no matter how early it was, I'm like, well, I've gotten this far. I need to do it. And that's what it turned into at the end, because I knew I didn't need to watch everything. But it's like, I would look at my shortened list that I put together a couple months ago, just like, okay, this is what I have left from my original list. And if I took out all of the TV shows, I would have only had 3 movies to watch. Like, well, I've come this far and now I'm all caught up, and most of them aren't going to make another season, so it doesn't really matter.
Right. Well, it's interesting because, yeah, a lot of, I mean, the Netflix series vaguely tied in at best. They basically just referenced the movies. And then the ABC series, the Hulu series really didn't tie in at all. Uh, I think Runaways was the only one that was really worth watching. But now, of course, with the Disney Plus series, they all tie in. So you're just ahead of the game in watching everything.
Oh, yeah. You know what I realized? I was thinking about this before I sat down today. I started this project before Disney Plus was even a thing. That's how long this has taken me.
Yeah, you started this before like the Fox Disney merger happened. So yeah, that's kind of insane. Are you glad you watched everything?
I am. Like, looking back at it, especially thinking about the TV shows, it's like, yeah, Shield's really the only show that up for like the first 4 or 5 seasons talked to the movie timeline. But when you watch the Netflix shows, and then when you watch Runaways and Cloak and Dagger, they interact with each other in their own way. I mean, all of the Netflix series, at some point, Claire's on it, because she's in all the superhero timelines. We see Danny Rand popping up in Luke Cage. So it's interesting to see how everything interacts, and even if watching all those shows didn't really bring a greater understanding to the main Avengers plot line, it's still some interesting parts of the Marvel world to explore, because you're looking more at run-of-the-mill people that are coming to grips with whatever their inhuman or superpower or heightened ability is, rather than this global stage of superheroes, which I find more interesting, because they're still normal people trying to figure out their lives and make it work while doing all the things that they're doing.
I think you did it in a very comic book way. I mean, because if you think of the main MCU in the movies, they're like that big crossover event. But you read all the offshoot like solo runs and everything that kind of tie in but don't necessarily tie in. So I think the way you viewed it kind of is a more fulfilling or true to comic book way to view all these things, which I don't know if that'll make sense to everyone, but if you've read comic books, you kind of know that sometimes there might be 4 different Spider-Man stories going in a month and they don't necessarily connect. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was neat. Do I wish I could have some of that time back? Absolutely. But now it's weird trying to think of what can I watch because I don't have anything Marvel left. I'm all caught up.
Yeah, you sent me a text the other night when you finished telling me you didn't know what to watch next. Did you find something?
Not yet. Right now, I just noticed that the Harry Potter movies are on HBO, so I'm like, oh, it's a fun time of the year to watch Harry Potter for the 37th time. So I'll do that rather than find something new.
They're on Peacock as well, and my friend in No Coast Avengers and Battle of the Ballads co-hosts Dan recently watched them for the first time with his daughter because his daughter asked. So he'll actually be here next week talking about that experience and how he's handling talking about J.K. Rowling as an individual and separating her from the material. So that'll be an interesting conversation. To give a little spoiler, or I guess teaser for that, not a spoiler, since I'm not going to tell you guys exactly what we're going to say because we won't know. So I want to kind of break them down into little things. With the Netflix series, what was your favorite Netflix series?
Probably The Punisher, and that surprised me. I did not think of all the series that I would like Punisher the most, but what I liked about The Punisher was you were constantly on edge with what was happening. That was the one series that I didn't have to watch because you'll watch a season of Daredevil and then you have to go watch a season of Jessica Jones and then you go watch 15 episodes of Shield and then you watch a movie and then you come back to season 2 of Daredevil. And what I noticed with The Punisher, it was the only one of the Netflix shows that it didn't take me 3 or 4 episodes to get back into it. I was back into it on episode 1 with how fast paced and intense it was. So that was something I really enjoyed about it.
Well, and John Barthol was the perfect Punisher, which is interesting because I think there's been I thought Thomas Jane in the one Punisher movie was a perfect Punisher too. So it's interesting that we've had multiple perfect Punishers, but kind of speaks to how every man that character is. What about with I'll call them the ABC and then Hulu, I guess ABC family with the Cloak and Dagger. But what about those other series before we get to the Disney Plus series?
I can tell you my least favorite was Inhumans. I watched it because I was very dedicated to it. I think I want to say Inhumans is what I had to pick up with when I restarted again back in March because it was right after I moved to my apartment. I could not get into Inhumans because you're just transported to a different world and I didn't feel like I got enough of build to care about the characters because the first episode is very chaotic. There's a lot going on. And I didn't feel like I had enough background on what was happening to feel invested in the safety and security of these characters. As far as favorite, I did enjoy Runaways a lot. There's a dinosaur in Runaways, so that was fun. And just the ways that they were able to kind of ebb and flow that storyline, focusing on their parents, switching to Jonah, looking at a larger scale. I thought they were able to weave the story into a lot more than I was expecting to see when I first started it.
Yeah, Runaways was a weird one for me. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the casting, but I loved the comic book run initially, and it vaguely at best follows the story, which is true of most of these projects. And I'm a very big proponent that a movie adaptation of a project doesn't need to follow exactly. It's a different medium. It's going to be a different story. But that one did test that for me a little bit because I didn't like the initial changes at first, but as I got into it, I really loved it. That was the one I thought probably should have gotten. I know Agents of Shield had a big following, but that I think Runaways is the one that deserved 6, 7 seasons versus a lot of those others. But I do have a question about Inhumans because I skipped it completely. That one was originally supposed to be developed as a movie. So I guess this is a 2-part question I have for you. Would it have worked better as a movie? And then also, did it just kind of feel like they tried to stretch out a movie for a season of television?
I think that does kind of hit to the point because I didn't realize that it was intended to be a movie and then they made it a series. I think had they dedicated it for a 2.5 hour movie, probably could have thrown a couple more dollars behind it too, to help with some of the issues I had with the special effects in it. I think it would have been a lot better as a movie rather than all of a sudden, here you go, 10 episodes, whole new set of people you've never seen, never talked to, never experienced anything with. Have fun. I think a movie would have been a better installment to talk about it, or if it could have worked somehow a little bit more into the Marvel world, because it just felt very separate from it, more so than any of the Netflix, anything else. It had a totally different flavor that didn't quite fit as well.
Yeah, and I wonder about that because it was supposed to be a movie for years and years and years, and then all of a sudden it was a series. I don't know why, when, how, or who came up with the idea of switching that, because it wasn't before they'd gotten rid of the Marvel television studios, so I don't know. Especially because it was two studios. That now it's one studio, and it seems like it's running a little more seamless in that thing. But yeah, it was two studios at one point, and two studios developing shows for multiple different networks. So I think that probably hurt them more than it would hurt some of the others. As far as the movies, what were some of the ones you really liked? What ones worked? What ones didn't?
As far as movies, I thought, see, I have to think back pretty far on some of these at this point. I really enjoyed the Guardian of the Galaxy movies. They were like the perfect addition that kind of tied everything together. And what I enjoyed about those is I think pretty much every list I found was you can kind of just watch Guardians of the Galaxy whenever you want before you hit Infinity War. Like as long as you get it in before then, you can just kind of tuck them in anywhere. So I actually watched those pretty early on because I remember seeing the first one and it was so fun and it was light. The soundtrack is great on it. So I watched those pretty early on. I enjoyed those. Avengers, I liked Civil War a lot. I hated Ultron. I really wanted to like Ultron. I've tried to go back and like Ultron. I don't. I like that we get the Scarlet Witch out of it, get Vision, and that's about the extent of my cares. I liked Infinity War and Endgame because it was the end of my journey. Like that was my original goal. I was going to do everything before Endgame came out, and we see how well that worked. And somehow I avoided every single spoiler, Gregory. I did not have one single spoiler for what happened. I had someone told me Spider-Man died, which was a false spoiler. And I kind of figured it was because the person who Dustin shared that spoiler, and he's so good at not giving spoilers. So kind of in my heart, I knew that was a spoiler.
That was a spoiler that was going to be immediately retconned. So I don't think anyone walked out of that movie thinking all those people were really dead. So
no, and that was my issue with Infinity War is had they not taken out so many main characters, I would have had a sense of, oh no, about it. Like think that maybe they don't win this one. Maybe they don't go back and fix it. And I mean, realistically, if you look at what happened, do they really win in every way? Because there's lots of fallout that comes back from fixing the timeline, which I have found interesting to explore in the Disney Plus series, since they're actually bringing that to the forefront and having discussions about, what happens when half the population disappears and comes back. How do you rectify that? How do you take care of everyone? How do you keep society functioning when it looks completely different now in a lot of ways?
Yeah, and I think I remember when you finished WandaVision, and WandaVision's emotional. Like if you watch WandaVision, you didn't get emotional at the end. Like I think in that last episode, there are 3 different parts where I cried even upon rewatch. And I told you Falcon the Winter Soldier was going to be emotional in a completely different way. And that's exactly what you're addressing right now, of course, is that's really the fallout. WandaVision, we see the grief in her individual, the fallout she's feeling, but we kind of see it in a global scale.
Yeah.
And then with Loki, we see on a cosmic scale, I guess, even though that's not just with the snap at the bringing everyone back, that's completely, I guess Loki coming back with the time is different, but it's really interesting how those three series tackled everything so differently. What were your general opinions about each of those series?
So I started with WandaVision. I It was a lot of fun, especially to start. I really liked the idea of framing it in terms of different decades of what popular TV was like then. I think that gave it a fun pep in the step, and made it really just a different way to watch through what she was experiencing. It didn't totally make sense when you think about how she got there and got into the situation. Then I kind of lost, like, why did we see it this way? But it was still, I still really enjoyed it. And once I went back and I finished Agents of Shield, I want to say it was season 7, the final season of Shield. There's lots of time travel happening, and they do something similar with their introductions. They're in different decades, things are presented differently. So it was fun to see them see Shield doing it before we see it in WandaVision. I really enjoyed Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Just seeing more of Bucky, like seeing more of him as a character, because he's kind of brushed over a lot in the series.
Yeah.
And just seeing him interact with Falcon and seeing what Falcon's going through with the loss of Cap and meeting a Black super soldier and not, and like knowing all of this history that was taking place, and then finding his position as a leader in a broken world that's trying to rebuild. It was powerful to watch in a lot of ways, and I like shows that have more of a powerful impact. So I did enjoy Falcon and the Winter Soldier a lot. I liked Loki because Loki's just fun. Anything Loki's in, anything he does, you're never quite sure where it's going to go, ending up on the desert planet with all of the Lokis, including the alligator Loki. I'm like, this is not at all what I would have expected, but I'm here for it, and we're gonna ride it the whole way through.
And I guess I really wanted the not what I expected thing. I want to focus on that because you watch this so much later than a lot of us, which with these series, not quite as late as a lot of us, but I know with WandaVision, the internet was all like, is Mephisto coming? Is Mephisto coming? And then, oh, who's the power broker? Who's the power broker? And I'm guilty of that too. I was on podcasts, we were discussing it. And now we actually have a joke where we make a Mephisto Reed Richards lock of the week, where we take some absurd thing that's going to happen. So far, we haven't predicted a single thing right. I don't know why. It's not like we're picking the most absurd things possible. But I think so many people were waiting for Mephisto that kind of dampened WandaVision. So like the constant who is the power broker kind of dampened who the power broker was. Mm-hmm. And then Loki wasn't what everyone expected. I think everyone expected Time Cop, but with Loki. Okay. And I think that definitely with my No Coast Defenders co-host, I know that took them out of it because they were expecting some like grand time hopping Loki adventure. But really, we got a story about a broken guy trying to fix himself. And I thought it was just beautiful with all the little details. So I'm just curious about you not having those type of expectations, how that was viewing it.
I think I really liked not having expectations, because I went into this watch through, and I'm still walking out of this watch through not really knowing that much about Marvel, not knowing much of the backstory of some of these characters, some of the richer histories around them. And I think for me, as someone who's an avid reader and can get bummed when the movie adaptation of a book comes out, I think I like that I wasn't expecting anything, because I didn't feel let down by anything. If anything, if I saw something that didn't live up to what I thought it could be in my brain, I was like, okay, maybe I didn't understand it correctly, or maybe I'm getting too carried away thinking about what it should be rather than what it is. So I was able to kind of shrug off the things I didn't like. Like even the fact I didn't like Ultron, oh wow, who cares? I'm over it. I know there's some people that saw a movie they didn't like and they're still hung up on it. So not having those expectations, I think, is the only reason I got through the whole watch through. Especially looking at some of the side series and some of the less prominent figures. If I would have had certain expectations of what I think I should see versus what I shouldn't, I think my frustration level probably would have been pretty high, and I would have said, forget it, never mind, this was stupid. So it worked out.
Yeah, I think with all comic book adaptations, I keep two things in mind. Douglas Adams, when he wrote the first draft of the screenplay for Hitchhiker's Guide, he said he was trying to tell the exact same story in a completely different way. And if you compare that first movie to the first book, or I guess only movie, that movie to the first book, especially, but it does take a couple parts from the second book. But that's exactly what he did. He told the same story in a completely different way. And then the fact that based on a true story means very little. If you think about the fact that Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Silence of the Lambs are based on the same true story, that's how little based on true story means. And that's how we look at these comic book adaptations of they're based on Marvel comics.
Right.
And that's all it is. I mean, if you think like the Ant-Man we're introduced to in the movies as Ant-Man is a multiple Ant-Men down the chain, since there's Pym and then Janet's Ant-Man at some point. So it's just interesting to hold these movies into the expectations of comic books that have been around since the 50s and 60s in some parts. So I think not going with expectations is the correct way to do it. Not being a comic book fan, how do you like how Marvel has introduced the more outside the box stuff into a universe that was fairly grounded? I mean, we slowly got magic, we slowly got space, and now we're getting time travel and dimensions, and but it felt like it just wound it up naturally. But not being a comic fan, how was it for you?
I thought it worked because everything had a justification and they introduced it slowly. It wasn't just all of a sudden in this movie, we're going to have time traveling magic aliens who also can make robots. And it wasn't at all like that. It was let's look at one piece of the puzzle at a time. And I think what they did, particularly when we start talking about the time travel, right, that's framed in a very scientific way, with Tony figuring out how to go back those 5 years, or more than 5 years actually when you think about it, to correct what Thanos did. And then we take more time to step away with time travel in a less scientifically grounded way, talking more in the big picture of the time police and everything. And even with the magic, I was a little surprised in WandaVision when they shifted it that way, but seeing more of Wanda's backstory and the way they built it up, I could accept it without feeling like it was out of place. I mean, at this point, I'm not surprised that magic exists in the Marvel universe. It fits. I do appreciate that they didn't just say, well, since we have superheroes, you just have to accept all these things and here you go. They took the time to make sure that it was a proper fit.
Yeah. So you don't think that if alligator Loki shows up in Captain America, the first Avenger, it's going to fit?
Okay, so that one might be a little bit of a stretch. Okay, the alligator Loki got me, and I'm still not clear on that one. I understand the whole multiverse theory and multiple Lokis. It makes sense, but just the alligator, I need to know more about this Loki before I can definitively say if I will look for him in the next Captain America movie or not.
I just love that it's still so open ended. Like, I think just Mobius asking how they know he's a Loki, they're like, well, he's green. I love that that's the justification for knowing. And it's just like, yes, let's not ask any more questions, since there's hundreds of Lokis running around fighting for power, and he's not one of the ones trying to destroy the others.
Right.
It was really well done. Now, throughout the whole run, who do you think some of the least used and characters that are more deserving of some more time in a future project?
Absolutely, Captain Marvel needs more time. And I know she's still relatively new. I thought the way she was used in just like at the end of Infinity War and in Endgame, I'm like, we could have done better for her. We could have done more with her. Because I think they're just like, oh, we can just send her back to space and bring her back to do one or two things and then throw her away again. I'm like, no, let's keep her around. Because she's just as much of an Avenger as everyone else. So I definitely want to see more of her.
I guess on a side tangent for that real quick. I know a lot of people really did not like Brie Larson in that role. I'm a proponent of the fact that it was just not the best executed movie, and they asked her to be multiple characters in the same character in that role. What were your thoughts on Brie Larson specifically?
Actively dislike her in the role. I was fine with her as Captain Marvel. I think like in any movie, there's things that could have been fixed, things that could have been done differently, especially as someone with a theater background. You could go in and nitpick whatever you want. This is actually a conversation I was just having with Ronnie. I feel like people wanted to nitpick on Captain Marvel because we finally got a kick-ass female superhero movie, and they're like, oh, let's find something wrong with it. So I don't really entertain that discussion too much.
And that's a conversation we've had with other female-driven movies as well. Yeah, I just felt like it was a movie that kind of lacked purpose and direction. She was supposed to be the fish out of water, also the stoic badass, but also a partner in a buddy cop movie. Those are three very distinct characters in movies. And she did as well as anyone's going to be able to do, having to switch between those three roles in a 90-minute film. So, yeah, I think she was fine. Okay, but back to more of the ones, folks, you are underused.
I would say Black Widow, but with the Black Widow film, I felt fulfilled. I felt like I had enough of her. I want her sister to have her own movie. That's another side tangent I could go on. After watching Black Widow, she absolutely needs her own film. She was hysterical and made that movie so much more than what I expected it to be. I'm okay that Iron Man's done.
I'm with you.
I feel like that's not me saying I don't like Iron Man or I didn't like RDJ's portrayal, but I'm okay that part is over, because I'm okay with how we saw him go. I think that was a really huge growth arc for him. So I'm cool that that's how it ends.
It felt like,
I hope that's how it ends. I hope we're not going to do any crazy let's go fix it things.
I hope so too. It also felt like every time they brought the character and they had to like revert the growth they had in the previous time we saw him a little bit so he could continue to grow. So yeah, he was great, but it had grown stagnant and he'd kind of become I'm going to show up in this movie, I'm going to make a joke, I'm going to disappear.
Yeah.
Whereas I thought Chris Evans, there was still room in Captain America, I think, but we also didn't see him in additional 27 projects like we did RDJ.
Yeah.
But I mean, Hemsworth looked done after the second Thor, and somehow he became like the best part of the group movies. So
yeah. I'm curious, do we know for sure if he's done, or is that just the general feeling?
Evans?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, as of right now he's done, but you never know. I've heard rumors that he was going to be back. So now, you watched What If? I did not.
I did, and I totally heard what you said when I first started it. It was a little hard to get into, and the concept was different.
Yeah.
Right. But it still is tying into the whole idea of the multiverse. And I think that's why it was put out there, because when you watch through it, it starts to make more sense and rather than standalone episodes, turn it into a complete series. Every part of that matters. So when you get through it, it was actually interesting. Not my favorite portion of the watch through, but it was worthwhile to watch just to get different perspectives of, yeah, you're right. What if these people had different roles? What if these things happened instead?
Yeah, we gave up on No Coast throughout it, and mostly because this is one of the ones where I let my expectations get the best of me. because after the second episode, it felt obvious they were going to tie everything together somehow, especially with Kevin Feige coming out and saying it was going to tie to. And the comic book what ifs, they're one shot episodes of, hey, what happened if this? Like, what if Spider-Man stayed a mutant spider? And that's what I was hoping for. I wanted one-off episodes that just got zany and wacky. So after the first one, I got excited talking about like the potential of what could have happened with Peggy Carter taking the super serum. Like, but then when it was clear in the second episode that, oh, she's probably going to come back, and that like they're leading to something, I was like, oh, the whole point of what if for me has always been to speculate and spin off. But if they're just going to tell me,
Yeah.
I have less time to think about it. Which is kind of funny that the what if series is, I think, the series I had the less time to speculate about what's happening around it. I'll eventually go back and watch it, I'm sure, but I'm not in a hurry.
Yeah.
There's just too much content out there for me to. But what upcoming MCU projects are you looking forward to?
Here's the part. Since I've been avoiding spoilers for so long, I have no idea what's coming next. And I'm okay with that. I know I'm looking forward to the next Spider-Man movie, especially with how the second one ended. I'm like, whoa, didn't expect that. So I'm excited to see that. It's really interesting to watch the Tom Holland Spider-Man movies and compare them to our Spider-Man movies. When I was a kid, I can't even think of his name right now.
I'm gonna ask, which ones are your Spider-Man movies? Are the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man your movies?
Yes,
movies? Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
Not that there's a huge age difference between us, but you also would have been like at a good age for the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movies to be your Spider-Man movies too. So.
Gotcha. Yeah. No, the Tobey Maguire ones. I didn't ever look at Spider-Man, since I don't have any experience with the comic books or anything. I never looked at Spider-Man as being that much fun. So the Tom Holland films, just they have a very different flavor than the Tobey Maguire, like totally different. Wouldn't expect it at all.
And part of that's the Sam Raimi direction, less than the base of the character. So
yeah, and I know not everyone liked it, but I think that it's a nice break from how severe and heavy the Marvel universe can be at times, especially since we were just coming from Infinity War, Endgame, and all that, like with so much weight. Having that little bit of fun and that little bit of like, I'm a teenager trying to figure it all out type of thing. It's heartwarming to see him, go head over heels for Mary Jane and be that awkward geeky teenager and still try to be a superhero and friends with Mr. Stark, and his interactions with Happy are prime. So I'm looking forward to the next Spider-Man a lot.
Yeah, it's crazy. Favreau went from directing the first Iron Man film to just being like a guest star in the Spider-Man films, and it's a perfect role for him. So I know one project that should be on your radar is the Marvels movie. I know you just mentioned Captain Marvel. So it's going to be Captain Marvel. Monica Rambeau is going to be back from Wanda. And then a new Marvel, Miss Marvel, who is, I believe, Pakistani in the comic books. So it's going to be interesting to see 3 Marvels running around. And the fact that they're just jumping into it too, because they're really ushering in the Young Avengers, which is what we saw a lot in the series. I don't know how much you saw of that, but like Isaiah's grandson Eli becomes Patriot, so he gets a super soldier serum. Wanda's twins are in the Young Avengers as well, so we're probably going to see them come back at some point. So it's just interesting to see that develop. But that's one of those like things for those comic book folks. Like when you see Eli in a future project, you'll be like, "Oh yeah, the Black Captain America's grandson." Like, but for us, it was like, "Oh shit, we're getting it." So
yeah,
it's gonna be really fun. Now, outside, did you watch the Venom movies? Were they on your list?
No, so they weren't on the list for what I should do for the watch through, but I do plan to go back and watch them because being a 6th grade teacher, all of my kids have gone to see the new Venom movie. and they know I've been watching through Marvel stuff, and they ask me pretty much every other day, have you seen the Venom movies yet? Can we talk about them after class? And I always have to say, no, be patient. So I should get to those sooner rather than later.
And of course, it's impossible to guess exactly what's going to happen in the Spider-Man film. Like something we talked about in the podcast, and then outside the podcast, trying to speculate what even source material is going to be it. Because one of the things is the source material, comic books, the prices explode. And so if you're a collector, if you're a flipper, that's the time to get. And Dan does usually pretty well with guessing what source material, what's going to explode in price. But some of the wackiest Spider-Man, Fantastic Four, Doctor Strange stories are blowing up in price for this movie because no one knows what's going to happen. But I have a hunch that the Venom movie is going to play into it. So
okay, so I'll have to get caught up on those before we get it.
Yeah,
So I'm ready.
As long as you know who the character Venom is, I think that's all you'll need to know.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it is, I think, gonna play in, just like the speculation is just the other two Spider-Man series are gonna play in. Don't be surprised I'm being told if the animated Sony Spider-Man is gonna come in. So I don't know. There should be no expectations going into the Spider-Man movie other than it's gonna be fun. Which I think is kind of how to go with the entire rest of the MCU. I mean, we have Hawkeye next, and Hawkeye is a character I love, and the fact that the young Hawkeye is going to come in, I think the casting of Haley Steinfeld as Kate Bishop is fantastic. I think she's a phenomenal young actress who doesn't need to be in a Marvel movie yet, but the fact that she's going to be is wonderful. But then I like that a lot of the other young characters are going to be unknown actors. Some of them, these will be their first roles. So it's interesting how Marvel's doing this, setting up for that next generation. And it's crazy. We are going to be watching Marvel movies probably for the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
Because I've started hearing a lot about Marvel fatigue, especially after Black Widow didn't do as well as people thought. But the fact that Shang-Chi did so well in the theaters, Eternals is not doing well, but I think that's probably because it's an Indian director with Indian influences in the movie. So I think that has a lot to do with it. I haven't seen it yet, but we're going to be watching Marvel for so much longer.
Just not going anywhere, because it's one of those things too. Like I feel like no matter how exhausted that people are getting with Marvel, they're still gonna go see it. Like especially people that have kids, their kids are still gonna want to see it. They're still gonna want to watch it. Kind of like with the Star Wars films, right? The new Star Wars movies. None of us wanted to see it, but we all did. Because we had to. You have to have that idea of I have completed this journey. So I think that's why we're still going to get Marvel thrown at us for the rest of forever.
Yeah, and honestly, I think Marvel's doing the right thing by aging the characters down to build up with new ones, because these movies probably very quickly aren't going to be for us. They're going to be for a generation below us, and I think that's the way to do it. And that's honestly, I think, where the new Star Wars movies failed. I mean, the first one tried to basically tell the original the regional sequel trilogy in one movie. Mm-hmm. And we'd seen it. We didn't need to see it. Second one tried to take us a completely different direction, and fans hated it. So fans hated when we told the same story. Fans hated when we went a different direction. They should just gone in a different direction from the beginning and solve that problem. But hindsight, I guess, because the original films that didn't necessarily follow in the Skywalker trilogy were the best. I mean, but we'll see with Marvel. I just want to touch about Black Widow real quick. Were you disappointed at how long into the MCU it took to get a Black Widow standalone film?
Yeah. I mean, you give us a Black Widow film pretty much as an apology for killing her off. That's what I felt like it was. It's like we had to watch her entire arc in the universe was shrouded in mystery, not knowing who she was. You kill her, and then you're like, it's okay. Here, now you can have a movie about her. I'm like, really? This is when you decide to get me full on invested in her.
And kind of crazy because we also her sister's introduced, her parents. There's a whole like widow army that's no longer under anyone's control out there, but they don't play in the catastrophic events that are about to happen. Like, and she sacrifices herself instead of letting Hawkeye do it because he's got the family.
Yeah.
And then we find out she just literally reconnected with her family. It's a
Doesn't
really,
add up.
it's
Does
a really
not add
weird
up.
thing. And I can only think about the fact that Feige has stated he wanted to do the Black Widow movie much earlier,
Mhm.
and he was not allowed. So, because he didn't have the control in the early and mid run he has now. And so I wonder if that's just the story he wanted to tell in the middle of everything. And he
Mhm.
just tried to make it work now. Taskmaster is the villain. How'd you think of What'd you think of Taskmaster?
I would have liked to see more of him than him behind his desk. Because we more just kind of see what he's created and the impact of it rather than him as an actual villain. So he felt more like an idea than someone we were actually actively fighting against.
Right. And you've already talked about how much you loved the Yelling character. Florence Pugh, just how great was she in this film?
She was awesome. Yeah. I think that film, out of most Marvel films, was excellently cast. Absolutely excellently cast.
I can't disagree with you. I'm higher on this film than a lot of people, but a lot of those people are very rooted in the comic book world and also men. And I think that it has to play a factor in that. It just really does. I think the only real criticism I would have is they both took too much pain, especially Scarlett Johansson in that film, to be realistic for just hyper trained humans.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, if you think about it, that's any action movie these days. They're always falling off buildings they shouldn't be able to survive. So,
right.
I mean, they are now flying their non-flying cars in the Fast franchise. So, I'm okay with Florence Pugh falling onto 7 different things, like chasing after her sister. And it was just a really good film. It's kind of funny to watch Scarlett Johansson be perfect in this film and still be outshadowed by someone.
Yeah.
Just
and I think
crazy.
it was just like it's one of those times that we're introduced to a new character and that like she just has so much presence, so much command in what she's doing, and she's so confident every second that she's on camera that you can't help but pay the most attention to what she's saying. And her portrayal was effortless, absolutely effortless in everything that she did. Whereas like we've watched Scarlett Johansson be Black Widow and build that character, it was just a very different experience seeing the growth of the one character versus just getting tossed in, you know.
Yeah, I was nervous about her casting at first because I mean I think of her as, I mean, she's perfectly cast in Greta Gerwig's Little Women. Like that's who I've thought of her as an actress. And so to see like that she was cast in this, I was nervous about it. But then she's dating Zach Braff, which is a weird pairing, but they seem to really love each other, so that's fine. But she was on she's been on a number of their podcasts, but they did a live one, and she taught how she makes a floatini. And just hearing her make her version of the martini, which is literally just vodka, she just had so much personality just being herself. And I'm like, you know what? If she brings half this personality to this role, she's going to be fine in this movie.
Yeah.
And then I just think Scarlett Johansson just has natural chemistry with everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And so it really helps that so does Florence Pugh. And they were just 2 worlds holding a gravity around the 2 of them. It's kind of a shame that we most likely aren't going to see the 2 of them ever again together.
Mm-hmm. It almost feels like a waste to bring that relationship and that chemistry, and we know that we're not going to see more unless we really do some tweaking to the timeline again.
Well, and even what I thought the nice thing about the way they were setting up the Black Widow film is Kevin Feige clearly loves Scarlett Johansson, and she could have played Natasha throughout the ages in as many movies as they wanted until they had the pay dispute. And now it just feels like we'll never see Natasha Romanoff in a film again.
Mhm.
Never say never. She generally did like playing the character. Otherwise, she wouldn't have done it in so many movies. But it just doesn't feel like we're going to happen again because we could have seen another adventure of them. We could have seen an alternate universe version of her, which could have been fun to see. There's so many workarounds around it, but it's now, I feel like, null and void. I don't know if we're going to get Florence Pugh in her own Black Widow film, but she's definitely going to be in Hawkeye. So she's definitely going to be a player moving forward, which is exciting. It's just really fun. It's going to be a fun time to see where they're going, because I feel like Hawkeye is going to be the first thing that starts to spin us more past the blip.
Yeah.
We've worked on setting up the blip and that there's going to be aftermath. This one, I think, is the first one that's not going to be worried about setting up a blip. It's just going to be story. So, all right. Thank you so much, Amy, for talking about this. I'm excited you finally.
Thanks for having me.
I'm excited after almost 5 years, you finally got through this rewatch. It's kind of funny you finished it just as Shang-Chi and Eternals are in theaters, and we're 2 weeks away from Hawkeye coming in. So you finished it just in time to have 3 projects quickly followed by 2 more. So
yeah, can't wait. Got it, because at this point you got to stay up to date.
Yeah, and the Venom movies aren't great. They're definitely a fun watch, though. Of course, you still, I don't think, have seen the new Suicide Squad.
The new Suicide Squad?
Yeah, James Gunn is now, I guess he helmed Suicide Squad. So Harley's back after Birds of Prey.
Okay. I didn't know that was a thing that happened already.
And I feel like this one kind of continued that Harley evolution we both loved in Birds of Prey, where she wasn't just this watered down Joker. She was like a person. It continued that, and actually she had a lot of say in how Harley was going to be portrayed in this film. So I think you of all people will really love this Suicide Squad. I think it's now off of HBO Max again, but we'll be back again soon, I'm sure.
Perfect. I'll have to look for it.
All right. I'm so glad to have talked to you, and I'm so glad to see you soon.
Yeah, I'm excited. A couple more weeks or month. More like a month.
Almost exactly a month, because we'll be seeing Gwar in a month.
Yeah, we will.
And then we'll be having steak dinner and mac and cheese for my birthday the next night. So.
Can't wait. Planned this perfectly.
Yes. All right. I love you, Amy. So glad to see you again. Thank you so much.
You too.